Hey guys, we want to welcome you back to season 3 of our podcast. We so enjoy doing these. We take different things and make different emphasis on different things every year. And we're going to start out this season by talking to some missionaries and a couple of people that are in mission work. And today we have two of our friends from Honduras. Well, one's from Krause and one's from Honduras, but they're both from Honduras now, Tara and Jorge. And I just want to tell you, let them tell you their story, because I find it to be one of the most amazing stories of any missionary I've heard. I was praying about it actually this morning, and I was thinking about the impact of your story. And then we'll loop Jorge into that, and I'll definitely loop you into it. But you're a story of just a little girl that had a dream, from the middle of nowhere to go change the world. And I know it's a God dream. I know you give God the credit and the glory for that. But it's important for two reasons. I believe, number one, those people out there that are listening that might be young little boys and little girls that have a heart for missions and don't quite know how to get there, or maybe they it's a daunting task and maybe it's too big for them. And I think your story speaks to, if you got a dream and God put it in your heart, just take those first steps and watch what God does. And the second part of it is clearly the impact of the ministry, because I know you went to Honduras to do a certain thing, and God led you completely to a different place. So I'll say this: we met years and years ago. We were doing Saturday night church here, and Tara started showing up to just volunteer and help us, and we just fell in love with her because of her servant's heart. And then she kind of explained to us that her heart was that of a missionary, and that she'd be leaving us at some point. So we kind of started following her journey, and it's this many years later, we tried to total it up off camera so that we would know exactly how long she's been, number one, how long she's been married, and number two, how long she's been in Honduras. So first, I want you to tell them a little bit of your upbringing and how you ended up here for that Saturday night thing.
Sure. Well, grew up outside of Krause in Cherryville, but very much connected to the Krause community. And I grew up in a non-Christian home, but still very loving family who supported me when I started to just really seek the Lord and go to church. And it was definitely the Covenant community that pulled me in and just gave me some foundation. And I was able to grow in my faith a lot as a teenager. Yeah. Really felt the Lord calling me at 16 and just started pursuing him. And he put all the right people in my path, which was really what got me where I was headed and got me to that Saturday night, I'm sure. Yeah. And just on fire for the Lord and wanted whatever he wanted for my life. I do have to admit, when I felt him call me to the mission field at 16, I didn't really like that. I loved animals and working with animals, so I thought I was headed in that direction. Yeah. But it was a very loud calling that I couldn't ignore. So I started to look into what that might be, and got to serve in a couple camps and things around in North Carolina that really helped me start to understand serving. And just got really involved in that arena and started to pursue missions.
Yeah. Well, you've been serving. So,
yeah, I didn't know what I was getting into.
Which is oftentimes good. The Lord will do that.
Right.
If he lets you know everything that's going to happen beforehand, we might get too intimidated with it and think, we can't. But right. But I remember us having this conversation when you were going. So did you go straight over there and start, or didn't you work with another ministry?
So I ended up getting a teaching degree, just because I also love children, and that's the only thing I knew really to do with that.
So you like children and animals?
Children and animals, yeah. And they are animals a lot of the times. So no. So ended up with a teaching degree, and that got me on the mission field for the first time. Yeah. So just started teaching school, and that's not where the Lord left me. Yeah. But that got me there to Honduras for the first time to teach school. Mm-hmm.
So why do you think, it's just a curiosity question, because I don't know if I've ever asked you this. Why Honduras? Why'd you pick Honduras?
I didn't really pick it. The Lord put it in my path. I definitely wanted to, in my, 17, 18-year-old mind I was going to Africa because that's where you went,
Yeah,
to serve.
Yeah.
That's what I saw on TV and heard, and saw posters and whatnot. So in my head, I was headed to Africa. I'm so grateful that I don't do that flight all the time.
Yeah.
So
it's long enough to fly from Honduras.
Yes. But my, there was a group of friends that were going to Honduras and they knew, of a school there that needed a teacher. So it was just the Lord putting Honduras in my path. Yeah.
I remember I was trying to talk you into going to Haiti before you went.
I know. And I'm sure I would have loved that.
Yeah, you would have.
It was, definitely
wherever
just the Lord.
Wherever you went, you were going to stay. But I think we know now that that's God appointments that have happened in that country because, we'll get to that in just a minute. But you've literally sat in front of the people that make the laws for the entire country where it comes to child care, orphan care, and things like that. That's pretty amazing. But anyway, so when you get there, you were teaching school, and then next.
Yeah. Well, I have to add, because this does give glory to the Lord too. So I took a couple detours before I got there.
Yeah.
I did feel a calling at 16, and I did do a couple short-term mission trips in college, but I ended up a single mom at the end of college.
Yeah.
And so that was a big detour, and I didn't know if I would ever get to the mission field.
Yeah.
And that was a heavy burden for a long time because the calling felt so strong.
Yeah.
But just to say the Lord can restore things and bring us back to that. So I actually went to Honduras to teach as a single mom of a 3-year-old.
Yeah.
So we ended up in Roatan, and I taught school there for 2 years. And while I was doing that, got connected to some orphanages, local orphanages. And so that's where God started to really tug at my heart for what my calling was to kids. And just drastic difference between the 2 orphanages I was getting to serve at. One had everything supported by a nonprofit from the U.S. and the other was supported by a local church and didn't have anything. Yeah. And so just seeing those two physically is all I could really see and understand at that time. The differences between the two, I just started feeling called to help support the orphanage. So
I knew which one. I know which one you chose to go help with. Yeah.
Yes, get supplies. I mean, we volunteered in both, but yes, supplies for the poor orphanage. About I don't know how many kids.
At least 30 kids with one person in charge of them.
So
that must
crazy
be when
situation.
You two met each other, right?
Yeah. So the second year we met on a bus trip. Definitely another God divine appointment.
Yeah, that's a whole story right there.
We could do a podcast on that one. No.
That's a separate podcast?
Yes.
How y'all met on
God's
a bus.
love stories. Yes.
Well, you can add a little bit of the love story into this one, It's that's part of your story, and it's part of the mission God had you on.
Right.
Wasn't just to, I believe, after watching you two guys together since 2007 when they got married. But
Thank you.
Anyway, they were together before that. Thank the Lord. Jorge remembered what year they got married, but so that is part of your story, though, because when I watched you take off, and you're just, I mean this in the most positive way. It's just a little bitty girl that takes off to another country and is going to just stay. But I thought that was beautiful to begin with. But then I watched you guys start partnering up. So tell a little bit more about how you met, and then how y'all started partnering.
Sure.
And did you have a heart for orphan care?
Absolutely not. I would have told you were crazy in the head if you told me I was going to be doing ministry. And I always say that God just tricked me into it. Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes. I'll tell you a little bit later how that go, because it's a little bit farther ahead in the timeline. But He put her in that path, in my path. So that was part of His plan. And like you were saying before, like missionaries don't really know what they're going to. Yeah. And the statistic about that is crazy, because it's more than 90% that end up doing something else that they thought what they were doing. Mm-hmm. Wow. And I think that's just God's way of saying, if I tell you what you're going to do, you're not going to want to go. Yeah.
So you meet the man of your dreams. Did you know it was the man of your dreams day one?
It was definitely love at first sight, but I didn't, it's a little burnt at this time anyway. And so wasn't sure, but he was my hero that day. That's part of our story. Yeah. We met on a bus, and we both were going to Guatemala for different reasons. And I had issues with my passport. We won't talk about my negligence of processes, but
She was illegally in country.
Stop.
Was it illegal?
For a day.
only by
Yeah,
a day.
for a day.
Only by a day.
By
And
one
there-
day?
One day. Well, there
Oh.
had been a hurricane on the island that I was living on, and I couldn't leave the day I was supposed to. But I did wait till the day of to leave.
Yeah, you
So,
could have done that a
could've-
couple weeks before, you know.
Yes.
No-
No,
our kids
maximizing the
love-
time.
Our
That's,
kids love
that's
to
how she
say
rolls.
good things can come from hurricanes,
Yeah,
like
right.
them,
Yeah.
because if
Yeah.
there hadn't been a hurricane, we wouldn't have met.
yeah.
God could have found another way, but still, it's a fun part to this story. So I had to travel a day late, which also equaled a handful of girls from the church I was attending were going to go with me because we were going to do a day in Guatemala before I flew out from there to the States. And so they didn't come because of everything happening with weather. And so I was by myself with Trinity, my daughter. And so when we had trouble at the border, I didn't have anyone to help. So he got off the bus
You stepped in
and he was our hero that day.
when you
so-
were scared. Good
Yeah.
job, buddy. That's
Thank
the
you.
way rescue the damsel in distress.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And so, that was, we dated like 3 years and then, got
Yeah.
married.
Yeah. So how you transition from helping with 2 orphanages to what was next? Just maybe a timeline for
Right.
what happened next
Well, just felt very much
while you're dating.
while we're dating, very much felt like the Lord was calling me into the orphan care instead of teaching. I didn't really know what that meant or what it looked like, but I knew I was supposed to keep helping orphanages at that time. And so actually before we got married, moved back to the States to start a nonprofit to reach out to orphanages and get funding and support. So started that organization and just started working. And then, after we were married, 3 years, we lived here in the States for about 2.5, 3 years. And then moved back to Honduras to run the nonprofit, or me run it, him work. He needs to tell that part of his story. And so we just started working with orphanages like crazy. So we did that for 8 years. Just
And that
running
thing-
ragged.
And that thing turned into, speaking of God transitioning you, what you thought you were going to run as orphan care became completely different.
Right.
This is, to me, the most interesting part of the story because the way God dropped in your heart to start doing orphan care has become like a springboard for the whole way the country is starting to do
Yeah.
it in Honduras. That's you, one little girl from Krause, that has a dream in her heart that God keeps dropping revelation in her heart. you
Yeah.
know.
He took us on a crazy journey. So we moved back. We started working with orphanages. During that time, I don't know, within a handful of years, we're helping over 40 orphanages with things that they need.
Yeah.
And so at first it was just myself and Jorge was helping and he was,
Working.
giving us transportation, being my translator. I'll let you step in and tell how the Lord tricked you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the part that I said I was going to tell you later. So, in my head, I'm providing as a leader of the family, and she's doing her ministry things that I approve of. It's not she's doing it like I don't agree with that. That was my parents. That
That's another podcast.
that's it. Yeah, that's for
another
number
podcast.
2. Yeah, that's for number 2. But went back. Before going to the States, I left a high-paying job,
Yeah.
or coming to the States.
Yeah.
Left a high-paying job. It was like reverse the normal immigration thing. I left a good-paying job and came here and washed windows and cut trees. Yeah, it was 2008.
Yeah.
It was 2008, so you have the
economy
financial
had crashed.
crisis and all that. Yeah, and.
Yeah, your parents were probably really excited about that.
Oh no, they hated it. But I was looking for jobs, couldn't find anything, and this is a long time, like a year. I'm looking for jobs, can't find anything, and we're doing ministry pretty much. I'm like the driver, I'm the translator, I'm the local that knows where to go and everything. But it would kind of weird me out, the reality of my own country that is right there, and I wasn't aware, or was aware, but didn't want to see it, right? So we're doing VBS and events and everything at the orphanage, and I'm sitting in the back, laying on a wall because
You're the driver.
I'm just a driver, yeah. And then as soon as they're done with it, all the kids, the boys, they just gravitate toward me and want to hang out with me, you know, and I'm treating them just like my buddies, not like the poor orphan kid, you know. So that's the way that God snuck up on me with that plan, because it became personal to me, right? It's not the little orphan kid, you know. It's a Shelley and Darwin and all of them, right? That are grown men now.
Yeah.
But then we got to the point where I can't find a job for a long time. I finally contact some friends that work for this gigantic multinational out of Minnesota. It's called Cargill. So I went to an interview and then another interview and third and fourth interview, right? So it's this done deal.
Yeah.
Right. And then the guy said, okay, I'm going to call you, come sign a contract. Right. And I have several friends that have worked at that company. They're all building houses. They all have new cars, you know, and then they called me, but they say, no, I'm sorry. The guy was super, you know, apologetic. It's like, I'm sorry. I assured that you were going to come and sign, but the financial department did not approve this new position. So there's nothing.
Yeah.
So we talked to our board, you know, and we say, hey, Jorge's been pretty much doing this full time for the past, you know.
Welcome to your new career.
Right. that was exactly it. Welcome to your new career. So the board approves our family budget. They say, write a budget, we'll analyze it, and then they approved it and everything. So 2 days later, phone's ringing, and it's this company.
Yeah.
Like, hey, that position never opened up, but we have this one's available.
Yeah.
When can you start?
Yeah.
And I was like, no, I'm not interested. And the lady
I'm
that
a missionary now.
Right.
In my own country.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
But the lady was, you know, no one says no to Cargill for a job. You know, it's it's like working for Google in the States, right? That everyone wants to job. I think Google is a good.
Yeah, that sounds right. I agree with you. Yeah.
And then as soon as I hang up, I started like, oh my goodness, what did I do? You know.
Are you sure, God? Are you sure?
Yeah, I had absolute peace when I said no, but as soon as I hang up, I started freaking out. Buddy. Yeah. And then it's like, okay, no, let's do this. And then a few weeks later, they call again. And then they call again and again. They call 4 times. Wow. You know, and every time I was like, okay, God, are you telling me that I'm supposed to go work for that huge company and just be a provider?
Yeah.
But long term, you know, like, I don't remember how long ago that was, but it was the right decision. I know now.
Yeah.
You know, but right there when you're struggling with with finances, living with your in-laws, different culture was interesting more for her than for me. Yeah. I had to hear about it every day. Like my dad would call me and like, hey, Jorge,
so y'all were living here?
No, that was in Honduras.
In Honduras already.
We had already moved back to Honduras. It was like 2010. Because we didn't raise support as a family because, you know, he just expected to walk back into that engineer job and be able to provide. So we didn't expect to have to live with his family for a long time. But but God provided. I mean, you know, when he took that step of faith and was just like, hey, must be what I'm supposed to be doing. Just really felt the call into it. And couldn't get a job. So that was helpful. But he had already given the yes when the job finally showed up, but you know, a year later. But so he stuck to his yes. And I mean, we wouldn't be where we are today.
Oh, no.
If he hadn't stuck to that yes.
Yeah. From our perspective, you know, watching the development of the ministry, it did change when Jorge was all in on it. You know, not that we didn't always know he was, you know, had your back in everything you did, which was beautiful to watch.
Right.
You know, from a dad that has 3 daughters, it was beautiful to watch that part of it. You know, that I felt like you were safer with him over there. You know,
of course.
You know, but just to watch him dive into the ministry, partner, really equal partnership, heart, spiritual, and all that other stuff was pretty cool. So, so I really want to transition to that part where you became like the people that changed orphan care in the whole country.
Right.
I just think that's just such an amazing story that God would just pick somebody from the middle of nowhere in the United States and change a country.
We think it's amazing too.
So tell us
We're
about
still
that.
like, what did you do with us?
Yeah.
So yes, a teacher and an engineer are hanging out at orphanages and just trying to help with needs. And we did, like I mentioned, we did that like for about 8 years. And so we're starting to see, that we're just putting Band-Aids on, like the cycle of poverty is not, ending. About 60.
Meaning there's tons of orphans in care with a couple of leaders in there, like basically, you describe it better than I can, but it's not much one-on-one. It's like,
Right. Our journey has definitely showed us that, kids aren't getting the one-on-one that they need in an orphanage, no matter how, willing and passionate and loving the director or the founder is. Like, it's just, you can't provide.
Can't do it. You don't have enough.
Right. And that's what we started to see. Yeah. We were running ourselves ragged, and we weren't even running an orphanage. We were just helping those who were running orphanages. And we saw some, just great folks and some beautiful efforts. And then we saw some horrible situations as well, of course. But over the 8 years, we met or heard of at least around 200 orphanages. And so we're starting to realize Honduras is overrun by orphanages. And it's not, and during those 8 years, of course, we're starting to see kids age out of the system and
then
literally see them having children and bringing them back into or those children entering the system. And so, about 60% just, they return to, life of crime, mostly poverty.
It's all they ever knew.
All the things. And so it really started to boggle us of why, because most of the majority of the orphanage is Christian, run by great Christian missionaries, giving them kids the gospel. We're like, well, what's missing if these kids aren't succeeding afterwards? Like, they're not even sticking with being a Christian with the faith, and they're being raised in the faith. And so just really confused at that. And so just starting to ask questions, but also, the Lord did some crazy thing when we working in San Pedro Sula, which is the second largest city of Honduras. At the time, it was the murder capital of the world as well. That's where he took me back to.
Way to go. I thought you were keeping her safe.
She's safe. She made it. She's tougher now.
Yeah. And so we get introduced to one of the public orphanages. So at this time, we'd only been working with private orphanages. Right. And so we walk into a scene that was unlike anything we'd experienced before. Even the worst orphanages we had helped, this was drastically worse. And so over 100 kids, special needs children, tied to beds, feces all over them, flies all over them, babies stacked in cribs, nobody feeding them, propping up bottles. They have scabies. They, just unbelievable. Like, I pretty much couldn't talk about it for days. But after you get over the shock, you just work, because that's what you do when you see something like that. And so we started volunteering specifically in Nueva Esperanza, which was one of the public orphanage with the younger kids.
Which means New Hope. Ironically.
Wasn't a lot of New Hope going on.
No. And it was government run. So we're talking about a third world country. It does not have the funds to run an institution. And just, understaffed, no money. And so much, political, you describe that better with all the strikes and
so it was led by the union. So if anyone came from the outside, like us, we would come with
enemies to them.
Right. Because you're doing what we're supposed to be doing, because we don't do it. So I just pull out a flag, close the front gate, and it's like, no one's coming in. We're on strike.
You were highlighting what their failure was.
Right. And we're saying, we just want to help you with what you're supposed to be doing, or to make it easier for you and faster and cheaper. And they're like, no, that puts us on the spot. Put flag out.
So we started to learn a lot of what it means to partner with the government. And of course, the director of the orphanage, the caretakers were like 100% come in, help. And they did allow us to hire a nurse and put a nurse there, because we're talking over 100 kids and no care. And so, so we're working with them about 2 years, and they just start, it's horrible conditions the whole time, but there's 2 events that kind of set up what the Lord wanted to do. And that was one, a special needs child died, and basically because of the conditions at the orphanage. And then the second, a newborn that came in, died within 4 months, Enrique.
Yeah.
And so after Enrique's death, the director was just desperate because obviously very bad publicity, and just hoping her heart, you know, is also like, I don't want this to happen. Right.
Yeah.
And so when babies were going, and special needs were going in and out of the hospital all the time because of conditions.
Yeah.
And so, basically the very next baby that went into the orphanage, into the hospital from the orphanage, Scarlett, she had been in several times with pneumonia already. And we're talking about a 6-month-old. Tiny, she's malnourished, skin hanging off, like you knew by looking at her. Yeah. She entered the orphanage malnourished, which was not Enrique's story, but so they were just thinking she had a heart condition. And so they were like, hey, we can't bring her back. She's going to die on us, and it's going to get worse and worse. Like, you take her home.
Yeah.
And we're just like, what?
Take her home?
What?
We didn't sign up for this part.
Right. Yeah. And it just we didn't have any background in orphan care, foster care, anything like that. We didn't come from those spaces. And so it hadn't even dawned on us. You know, our thoughts were, if we take any children home, we're going to have to open an orphanage, then we can't help orphanages. Yeah. And so that never was a desire of ours. Yeah. And so, but we have a baby dying in a hospital, and pretty sure she wasn't going to make it through the night, but the director was like, if she makes it through the night, you have to take her home. Yeah. Like, it wasn't even really a request. It was kind of a demand. But thank the Lord, we had a close friend whose husband was there working with Samaritan's Purse, and she was a nurse, but didn't have a position at the time. And she was just a close friend of mine. And so she was like, I'll take her home. You know, as a nurse, I feel more equipped, and I'm okay if she dies on my watch, basically. And we're like, okay, let's do this. And so that was our very first foster care placement.
When she's saying that die on the watch, there was a mission team working at that orphanage, and there was a nurse in the team, and she said, I want to go to the hospital and see her. Yeah. So I took her to the public hospital, and she saw her and said she's not going to make it through the night. I mean, her skin was kind of grayish. Yeah. You know, tubes everywhere, and it was sad situation. But
our friend Emily, she did survive the night, and they did release her to her care. And within 4 months, she was a thriving baby girl.
Wow.
And so the issue had been reflux. And because they didn't have enough staff to hold babies when they fed them, they just propped up the bottles. All the milk was going in her lungs.
Wow.
And that's why she kept having pneumonia. So she was going to die from reflux. But the nurse caught it. Emily caught it right away, got her reflux medicine. Within 4 months, she was chunky and looked like a different baby. Yeah. So this started a crazy chain reaction of the director being like, oh, I can send sick babies home with Tara and Jorge. And they're gonna handle this. And so during that time, we also become foster parents because, you know, if she said this one's sick or this one's in the hospital, take them home. We didn't want to say no just because we didn't have another Emily. And Emily was still caring for Scarlett. And so we just began to take children home, which isn't the way to start foster care for anybody listening that's considering starting foster care with another country. But it was a God thing. And so within 2 years, we were able to take home 40 children from that orphanage, special needs and babies and toddlers. And
so you were taking them to your house. How long were they staying?
Oh, I prayed really hard. So like 2 weeks.
Couple of weeks, and God
some
would
of them
send
stayed
someone.
forever, like our son Judah. But the majority went within 2 weeks. We had 8-year-old. I don't even know it now. You have to tell me what numbers. Trinity was probably 10. Joseph was 4.
At one point we had 5, and I think 4 of them were special needs. Plus our children. Judah wasn't there yet.
So Hosanna was still a baby.
Hosanna was a baby, and then Joseph was probably 2, and Trinity.
10.
Y'all by now y'all putting Trinity
22.
to work.
She's 22. She's finishing school.
She's 22 years old.
She's 22 now.
She's a little kid to me. But anyway.
I know.
That
happens. So yes. So just obviously very organically, we weren't, you know, and then we would just pray, and we'd run into someone, or someone would tell someone else, and they would come to us and be like, hey, I'm happy to help. And so all those children went to Honduran families, Christian, God-loving families. that we didn't screen or do any psychological tests on. So also not the way to run a foster care program, but it would literally was just the Lord. We were in Honduras, and in a country that didn't have a foster care program. So the government did do paperwork and gave them permission to have them, but there wasn't what you would consider a process. Just people saying yes, and it was huge because it was the Honduran, Christian families.
Yeah.
So 40 kids within 2 years, and we start to be like, God's doing something.
It took 40
it took 40 kids.
Y'all are smart. Y'all really quick learners.
There's a trend here.
So you would take them home or keep them for 2 weeks, and then you'd try to place them in Christian homes. Okay.
Yeah.
Just so everybody keeps in the loop on this, because this is the part that just blows my mind, that it turned into an entire ministry kind of thing. So y'all basically started going to churches and asking, hey, who wants?
Yeah, not even yet. We weren't even recruiting yet. The
No,
Lord
yeah.
really
People were
just sent
just
those
showing up.
families. The Lord just sent those families.
Wow.
I can't even remember all the different ways. I can remember a couple that are really fun, but he did. So within those 2 years, we haven't been able to recruit 40 families since in 2 years.
Yeah.
So it totally was the Lord. And then at the same time, so at the end of those 2 years, we're now going into like 2014.
Yeah.
And this is when the government also makes what we see as a God strategic shift, which, because God's got his hand on everything.
That's right.
And so the president at that time sees all the corruption in the welfare system and completely shuts it down.
Wow.
Yeah, he dissolved the whole thing and created a whole new one with the focus of empowering the nonprofits.
Wow.
To do the job for them.
Which is the opposite of empowering the unions to keep
Right, absolutely,
yeah.
I mean, it wasn't that excuse me, it wasn't that simple, that transition, right? Because it was a lot of employees that had to be let go, that people were upset, a lot of money involved, having to pay, all the severance and all that. But he did it. I mean, and we saw the impact, immediately, right? Because you have people that are doing it because, they're hard and not just a political employee, someone's cousin that, okay, I'll give you this job because you help with campaign or whatever.
Yeah, so it was huge because by this time, 2 years later, into doing this, we're starting to, realize God's doing something. And dear friends of ours, Angie and Dave Dunleavy, who just visited regularly, told us basically, hey, you guys are doing foster care, but you can do it quite a bit better. There's other aspects you should add, because we were, again, very clueless to that, and send us to training. And so they had witnessed through their connection with an organization called Christian Alliance for Orphans, where just orphan care organizations come together and share resources. So they'd been a part of that network, and they're like, hey, you can go learn how to do this really well. And they had just the wisdom to kind of see where God was taking this with two people and a very small team of maybe 2 more people. I think we had like a team of 4 at the time. But they were able to kind of see really get the big picture of what God was doing. They're like, you have to go. So they just blessed us with everything, sent us to training. He got to go to Costa Rica and train under Casa Viva, which is a Christian organization that does the foster care in Costa Rica. And so just got all the tools and resources. So literally at the same time that they're dissolving the welfare system and starting a new one, with all of that help, we were able to present an entire policy and procedure and manual and everything for foster care through those resources.
And you took that to the top.
Yeah.
Basically. So y'all sat down in a room with the president?
No, not quite.
No, I knew you didn't. I was just saying, but the people who advised the president.
Well, at this time we got to sit with our welfare office workers, the new entity that the president created, and just say, hey, this is foster care. This is
better way.
This is what we would like to do with you. Right. And they were just super excited. And because of the way he had, instated the whole thing with work with nonprofits, it was like, great, let's do it. So
that's pretty good. That'd be, and I don't want you to understate what happened, because it shifted the whole country.
Right.
I mean, it's your conversation, and I know God's timing was perfect with government and all that stuff, but your friends giving you the information you needed, you taking that information first internally and then taking that information to government, is a whole shift in the whole entire country.
Yeah.
instead of just filling orphanages full of kids and putting
Right.
5 people over them if they could find them, they started implementing orphan care in homes, and
Right.
specifically for you guys became Christian homes, where that's when the recruiting started. Yeah,
Right.
Where y'all would go to churches basically in Honduras and say, "Hey, how many of you families are willing to take a child?" Yeah, and
Exactly.
yeah, turned into that. How many kids have you placed now?
I should have looked at my
should
thing.
ask Jorge.
170, I think, was last year's
170.
annual report.
So instead of 170 kids being in an orphanage with hundreds and hundreds of kids, they've been raising families, and with 1 or 2 brothers or sisters, or sitting around the table eating
Right.
breakfast, lunch, and dinner,
Right.
and going to church. So
And it's getting to, after working with the orphanage 8 years and making, personal relationships with a lot of the kids, it really is amazing to see and just confirm. I mean, it's God's design,
Right.
family for
Yeah,
kids.
that's
And,
statistically, you were talking about when the kids at the first orphanage would leave, and then you'd see them bring their kids back, and even these kids that were raised with a core in Christian orphanages that would fall off the cliff. What's it look like in these kids' lives now that have been raised in homes?
right. I mean, it's just drastically different. Even just going from our personal experience of the orphanage with, 30 something kids with no caretakers, you walk on campus and they're on you. They're on the car as you enter in. They're so,
They won't.
They run to you, grab your legs,
Right.
and,
This won't love.
Absolutely. What would
This
you
won't-
think if your kids would do that to a stranger?
Right.
Oh, there's a stranger there. Let's go hug him, because no one hugs us.
That's desperate desire out there to be
and
loved.
obviously in those 8 years of doing that, we just felt great. We're like, oh wow, we're
love
impacting
us.
these kids' lives. We're giving them a relationship. They like us so much. It's wonderful. And then, to transition to foster care. And now when we see our kids in our foster care system say we're having a training day or whatever, half of them don't even know my name.
Yeah.
None of them, I mean, there's a couple that come and hug us because they know us, but there's very few that do that. And it's just that alone, you can see the picture of they're getting the attention and love they need. They don't
That's true.
they don't need it from a stranger that they see once a month or something, you know. And
or the first time they're hugging people, I can also see that part going severely wrong. A kid that has never had love was willing to go grab a stranger.
right.
What if the stranger hitting you? What if the stranger hitting a Christian?
Right. Well, and that happens, of course, which is really, really sad. But I mean, just seeing that alone, and we began to.
Yeah, at the end of that cycle too. Like when they're aging out of the orphanage.
They're
and
still looking
what,
for somebody to love them.
Yeah.
yeah, what you said is like they go back to what they knew before.
Yeah.
And I always like to think about it like if they would grab you,
Yeah.
Separate you from your family and send you to wherever far away, what would you do?
Yeah.
You probably become a pastor. Well, again, right? Because that's what you know what to do, So you go back to what you know. So they just go back to whatever they were doing before that because they didn't learn that from a family, how to do family.
That's pretty cool.
Well, and they always are drawn back to a biological family. And we know that from even wonderful stories of adoptions.
Yeah, everybody is.
Yeah. So that just really, it took pretty much, we were just running with the Lord and just,
You were running.
we were running. And, but after really, really formally starting foster care and getting into the depths of it, it was really took that whole year for us to see why God did that, for us to really understand. So we started to see like these kids totally different from the kids we were loving on in orphanages. And the biggest piece I think to get home is like the directors of the orphanages or even the caretakers, for the most part, weren't loving the kids any differently than the foster parents. They loved them as much, but you just don't have that type of capacity to give each kid the one-on-one that they need. Barely can do it for my 4. So, and so it's just, you can't replace the model of family with anything else that isn't family.
Right.
And so we really began to see like all these like, oh gosh, all these different things that happen when a kid gets raised in a family.
Yeah.
And so
why did you name it Identity Mission? I mean, where'd that name come from? You just pull it out of the air, or did like something else happen?
It's a really great question. It's definitely a God story. I absolutely love it. So when I started working with orphanages, we were doing that with the nonprofit I began as a very young person. Yeah. And that over 8 years working with orphanages, then we, entered that foster care sector. So at that point, the decision was made to start a new nonprofit, and the old nonprofit wanted to keep kind of in the arena of orphanage work.
Yeah.
And so when we started the new nonprofit to focus solely on foster care, we were at a loss for a name.
Yeah. You had to have another name because it can't be the same one.
You can't register a nonprofit without a name, and it can't. Well, yeah, it can't be the same either. Yeah. And so, funny enough, we had received an invitation to speak about our work in a new church in upstate New York where my sister had recently moved to, and she always manages to get whoever she talks to involved and excited. It's a gifting. And so that church was excited to connect with us, Abundant Life in Lowville, New York. And so we went, and I had to tell, I land, then I have to go talk to the pastor. I'm like, hey, I know you invited me to speak, but I'm no longer with that organization. Yeah. We're doing this, and we shared the story and why and everything. And he's like, okay, that's fine. So God bless him for just being like, go for it.
Yeah.
And so I literally had 3 days to come up with a name. Yeah. And at this point we just hadn't. And so my sister, who's very creative, tried. We had tons of different ideas, but none of them were right. And so arrived Sunday morning, and I'm sitting in worship, and I still don't have a name for this organization that I'm about to present to a church as a new partner. Yeah. And so sitting in worship, and I had never heard, being on the mission field, sometimes you're just out of the loop a little bit. So I'd never heard the song Oceans at the time.
Yeah.
This was 2014.
Yeah.
And I hadn't heard the song. And so the worship team plays that song.
Yeah.
And at the part where it says, I am yours and you are mine, the Holy Spirit just literally drops the word identity in my heart. Like a big boom, it's one of those moments. Yeah. And very few, we get to have those very few, but when they happen, you're like,
when they happen.
They happen. And so I turn to my sister, I'm like, identity, it's identity. And somehow that came my identity mission. And so I get up, and so I'm about to share about it, but I'm so overwhelmed by what the Lord's done. I just start bawling in front of everybody.
You're about to cry now.
Yes, I am. And so I tell them at that moment, like, the Lord just named the organization. I have to share this with you. It's Identity Mission. And then I share a little bit about it, and I'm crying the whole time. That church is still partners with us today.
They are. Yeah.
And God's done a lot through that partnership.
Well, awesome.
But it was during the whole year, like I mentioned, that we actually understood why. So we didn't know even at that time that like psychologically, emotionally, you create your identity as you grow up in your family. Wow. And so a big piece of kids aging out of orphanages and not being able to have, successful lives or get through trauma or things like that
an identity issue.
Is because they haven't done that and been able to do that work. Cool. And so that it just naturally happens in families. Yeah. And so we learned as we grew from what the Lord named us.
Well, God's good. Mm-hmm. So once again, he named it, and then he told you why.
Yeah, he does that.
Kind of like everything he did to y'all.
Yes.
So anyway, so now everybody knows our story, why we love this ministry so much and support it. We have them here a couple times a year. They come back to see us, and we feel like we're their home base. We just have adopted them in generally anyway. We had adopted Tara a long time ago, but we've now adopted Jorge as well. So he's one of our elders is on their board and keeps us in the loop. Tara and I, she sends me emails pretty much weekly and keeps me in the loop. But I'm just like proud of them, basically, ultimately, because I know the courage to just go and do it, and the courage to just put down your dream too and say, you know what, I'm going with God, and not knowing. And that's the beauty of him, when he works so much better in our not knowing. But you have to say your yes, and I appreciate that. So anyway, I told you this would be easy. It would go by fast. But, so tell them a little bit, and we're going to kind of close it out, and we'll put some information. Ryan is brilliant. He's back there behind the camera. He's brilliant. We'll give you their contact information for you guys that see this that aren't in our area, and you want to help them financially or send them prayers or whatever. We'll put all that out. So tell them how Identity Mission became Identity Mission, and maybe what your needs are, and we'll close it out with that. So
okay,
yeah.
Well, I mean, so you create your identity in your family, and so all that we do is family-based care. Yeah. Also partnering with biological families. Yeah. But what we've really noticed, God's pulled out of identity. That is His heart. As much as the kids being His family, is the church being the answer. Yeah. To providing the care and solutions for orphans that are in need. So being the solution for orphan care. And so we partnered with Honduran churches through this, and we're even, restructuring that today to do it even more because we're starting to feel more and more if the church stepped back into the role of orphan care, the church as a whole, like all of us Christians, but also the church as the individual organizations. If we step back into that role, it's really, really going to be what, kind of ends this age of orphans not having family. And so that's a big passion of ours.
It is in the Bible.
Mm-hmm. It is in the Bible. It is. It's there as a mandate. Yeah.
It's not even an optional choice for us.
So we feel that's definitely part of our calling, is not just to run foster care per se, but it's really to pull the church back into answering that call. And so in our kind of to say how you can partner with us is our heart isn't, we need financial donors to be able to do the work because Honduras is a poor country. Even the Honduran church pours a lot into helping Identity Mission with orphan care, but they don't have the funding, that's necessary. And so that 100%, just keeps the work happening. But even more than that, what we desire is looking for others that are like, okay, what's my part in orphan care? Because not everybody's called to go in the mission field. Right. Not everybody's called to be a foster parent, but we strongly believe from the Bible, everybody's called to do something in the orphan care arena. And we just love to help people get to that, to get to that calling, to figure out what's my place. And so that's the kind of partnership we're looking for. So we're happy to, talk to anybody, to, get you connected to your space, even if it's outside of identity. If it's fostering locally, we want to have that conversation. Right. And so really that's the partnership. And if, we're open doors.
And if you're interested, you can, go ahead.
We know that God has been working on people's heart already. We're not convincing anyone of helping in orphan care, right?
Yeah.
And then we're there to partner and provide that, that opportunity for people that can't go and do it themselves. We can do that part.
Yeah.
Right.
So anyway, what we'll do is we'll put a link, and then we'll get you, they'll send you their newsletters and information, how you can connect to the ministry. And I loved when it became Identity Mission too, because I knew your heart, and I knew if there's one thing the enemy is always trying to destroy in us, it's our identity in Christ. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, thank y'all for coming today. Thank you for coming this weekend. We're going to have a big weekend with us here with our the kids in our church that we feel like, the young people in our church, we feel like are called to missions. Mm-hmm. They're going to meet with them tomorrow and just kind of give them some heads up. Maybe send some of them to Honduras for a while. You don't have to permanently keep them, but we're going to send them out. But you never know. Right. But anyway, we appreciate you coming in. We love y'all. We're proud of you. We're grateful to be connected with you. And it's just been one of the blessings for our church to be partners with you for so long. And we'll continue to be, I promise, because it's been so fun to watch God work. And again, in this little girl with a dream, from the middle of nowhere that was raised in a non-Christian home that's impacted an entire country. I just feel like only God can do that. So anyway, we appreciate you guys tuning in with us today. We'll have more to back this up. We're going to kind of maybe talk to a couple more missionary type things, do a couple things like that in the future. So we appreciate it. Appreciate Ryan behind the camera back there coming in to do all of his hard work. And he loves it when I call out his name. No, he doesn't. Actually, he does not like for me to do that. So I'm doing it anyway. We love you, buddy. Anyway, thank y'all for tuning in today. We'll see you next time.